Okay, good morning once again. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, I'm Paul Ryofsky, and I'm having the... Pardon me? Oh, okay. It says mouth inches, 10 inches from mic, so is that better? Oh, is there a problem with that speaker? Okay, I don't know. Do we have any AV support here that can help with that? Yes, we do. Thank you for pointing that out. We definitely want everyone to be able to be heard and for all of you to be heard. Just a few housekeeping notes. We have 2 microphones for when we get to the question and answer period, which will be extensive. That's why we have a full 2 hours together. One on that side and one on that side. And in case someone is sitting inside the aisle you're on, I encourage you to help them get out easily, because what we will do is in the question and answer part, we will have people line up at both mics and we'll just go back and forth. That's really important because otherwise no one else can hear the questions. Again, I'm Paul Ryofsky. I'm up here because I'm the Berkeley delegate to the CUCSA, the Council of UC Staff Assemblies. And with us today, to my right, to my left, your right, we have, no, I got that wrong. Yes, we have Gary Schlimgen, who's going to do the initial presentation from OP. He is the Director of Pension and Retirement Programs there and has been in the supporting role to the task force and on all the work teams in the steering committee. And then we have Dwayne Duckett, who is Vice President of Human Resources at Office of the President. Someone we know well at Berkeley, Nathan Brostrom, now Executive Vice President of Business Operations. Nice to have you back at Cal, Nathan. And then we have Robert Anderson, who is Professor of Economics and of Mathematics and Chair of the Faculty Welfare Task Force. We have Mel Stanton, who is the Associate Chief Investment Officer for OP and on the finance work team. Then Lynn King, who's the chair of CUCSA this year and has been serving on the pension benefits work team, will be joining us. And then we have Marion Gade, who is the chair of the Council of UC Retiree Associations. And finally, we have, once again with us, Randy Scott, the Executive Director of Talent Management and Staff Development for OP. Again, like Nathan, on all the work teams and the steering committee supporting the task force. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Gary for our presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks to the local coordinators for arranging today's presentation. This is our 15th spring forum. So if I could ask, please, that you all turn your cell phones on. It will help us stay awake for my presentation. Okay? So how many active staff in the crowd today? All right. How many retired staff? Okay. All right. Any emeriti? All right. Active faculty? All right. So we're going to do we're going to try to limit this presentation. It's a panel presentation. We're going to try to limit it to 1 hour today so that there'll be plenty of time for questions. The entire task force is here to respond to your questions. Members of the task force are here to respond and to take the feedback that we receive from each of the local forums back to the work teams to bake into our process and to bake into the recommendations going forward. So for the agenda today, we're going to talk about the financial and the funding issues first. That's the first section of the presentation. And that's a major work of the workforce, of the finance team, these overarching financial issues with our pension plan, the University of California Retirement Plan, and the Retiree Health Program. And then, of course, that's not the only aspect of the program or of the evaluation. We're also going to talk about talent management implications and the market competitiveness of our programs today and how any changes to our current programs might impact that. We're also going to update you on the scope of the work of the task force, the process, as well as the range of the options that the task force has reviewed. And we'll go over the next steps and the timeline. The task force is not making any decisions. The task force is only making recommendations that will go to the president The academic senate process is also underway, and we'll talk about that also. We're here today to talk about shared responsibility, not shared sacrifice, and we're here to talk about sustainability, not benefits elimination. All right, so here's the timeline. I got a chuckle. So here's our timeline. Going back a year, March 2009, this task force was formed. The work group was formed. Steering committee and the work teams have been meeting. We did a series of fall forums. We did 32 of them. The biggest one that we had last year was the Berkeley Staff Forum. And the fall forums, the version of the fall forum and the PowerPoint slides is recorded. It's up on the UCRP Future website. It has a lot of background about the pension program and the retiree health program. We're kind of picking up from that presentation. We're not doing as much financial background today as we did before. We did extensive consultation. We did some surveys that Dwayne will talk about. This is April right now. We're doing the spring forums. We're doing another 30 forums across the UC system. We're going to take, again, this feedback from these forums back to the work teams in the May meetings. And then again, the report will go to the president with the recommendations in June. There'll be a Regents discussion in July, and then a decision on when the report will be made public. And the academic senate consultation is ongoing, like I said. Okay, so we had this later in the deck, and we moved it up because this is what is important to all of you in the audience, of course. What's the most important is what is not changing. And we can tell you that the pension program, UCRP, the pension benefits that current employees have already accrued that have earned to date are fully protected. And a retiree has fully accrued and earned their entire pension benefit. And we can tell you today that the defined benefit plan is continuing. It's absolutely continuing. And we get this question once in a while from retirees, well, will they be asked to contribute to UCRP when we restart contributions this month? And the answer is no. Retirees have already made contributions to the pension plan when they were working. For the retiree health program, it is also continuing. We are continuing the program. There's been no discussion of eliminating the program. And there's the basic program eligibility will continue if you've already retired. There's no changes if you've already completely earned your retiree health eligibility, the program eligibility. We also know what's not changing is the University of California is going to face severe budgetary pressures for the next several years. That's not expected to go away anytime soon. The state has still not stepped up to fund a pension contribution to the University of California retirement plan for the salaries that they support for the employees that are in the pension plan. Unlike what they're doing with PERS and STIRS, they are continuing to pay a defined benefit contribution to those pension plans. So advocacy is very important. There's a UC for California website. There is a UC Advocacy Day on Tuesday, April 27th. So it's really important that we do get funding for our pension plan, and we'll talk more about that as we go forward. So I'm contractually obligated to read this slide. This is from Office of General Counsel. So this is our fiduciary and legal post-employment benefit obligation. This is how we're unique at UC. We're not like PERS or not like STIRS, where we're legislated or where we're statutory in the code. We're autonomous. The plan document, the Regents define the terms of the plan. Under the terms of our pension plan at UCRP, all of the benefits accrued to date are protected. Thank you. Let's keep us awake. The plan, however, reserves to the Regents the right to change future accruals of pension benefits for current employees. Pension and retiree health benefits can be changed at any time. For new hires, can be changed at any time. And the last time we did the change to retiree health benefits for new hires was in January 1, 1990. We went to graduated eligibility. Everyone hired January 1, 1990 or later was subject to a different program eligibility criteria than those hired before. And retiree health benefits are not vested, so changes can be made to health eligibility, plan design, and premiums for both current faculty, staff, and retirees. We'll talk more about that as the presentation goes on. All right, so let's talk about the financial and funding issues with this program. They are significant. These programs have helped fuel UC's growth because we've essentially priced the pension cost at zero. There's been no employer contribution for 20 years. Now that is restarting at the 4% rate on the employer side, and that will need to go up. But we've been very competitive because we've had this pension price priced at zero on the employer side, and it's fueled our growth. But to stay financially sustainable, we really need to reevaluate both programs in the context of our current and future financial environment, especially with this level of state support that we're receiving. So let's talk about the UCRP and the retiree health program in the sense that they're separate. The UCRP assets are held in a trust. There's $32 billion in market value of assets that are available in that trust to pay benefits. And the entire trust is with the campus and medical center segment and with each of the labs, all the money in the UCRP trust is available to pay benefits, $32.3 billion. The benefits are paid from that trust. We pay out about $1.5 billion a year in pension benefits to our retirees from that trust. Retiree health benefits are separate. They are not paid out of the trust. What we do with our retiree health program, what we've always done, is we do a departmental assessment. It's currently $3.12. We charge every campus, every department, every med center a tax on covered payroll. And we collect that money, $3.12. We flow it through a trust for consolidated financial reporting. And then we use that money to pay the UC premium for retiree medical and dental for our retirees and their dependents. That's how we pay for the program. It's called on a pay-as-you-go basis. It's separate and distinct from the pension trust. So this is an overview of the growing unfunded liabilities of the two programs. This chart isn't new. This is the same chart that was in the fall presentation and in the Regents presentation in November. And this shows the growing unfunded liabilities for our pension plan and our retiree health program together. Today, on a smooth basis for our UCRP assets, we have about a $16.5 billion shortfall when you combine the unfunded liability with the pension plan with the unfunded liability of the retiree health program in yellow. It's $14.5 billion liability for the retiree health program in yellow on top there. When you look at the liabilities, the unfunded liabilities going forward in time, they total $40 billion by 2014. That's why this has been a primary focus of the task force, is to look at these growing unfunded liabilities, how we can sustain the programs, how we can better fund our pension plan, should we pre-fund retiree medical. A lot of big funding issues are being addressed by the finance team in the workforce. So what's happening here with the red bar there, the liabilities, the UCRP actuarial accrued liability there is the red. That's increasing every year by about $1.4 billion. And what that is the UCRP normal cost. So for every active employee in the system, there is a cost or a liability that the pension plan incurs for an additional year of service credit. That's about $1.4 billion. The equivalent of that is 17% of pay. So we're adding that in a liability every year to the plan, to the pension plan as a liability. And we haven't been collecting assets to support that liability from the funding sources that are creating liability, whether it be a state-funded liability or a med center or a self-supporting enterprise or the Department of Energy. But we have restarted. We're starting at the 4% employer rate this month, and the faculty and staff are starting at the 2% rate in aggregate. It's 2% less $19 up to the wage base, 4% less 19 above. So we have restarted contributions, but the total is 6. So when you look ahead here, the assets are declining in the pension plan because this is a smooth basis. We're rolling in losses from prior years that have not yet been recognized. So the pension plan assets are continuing to decline, one, because we're rolling in prior losses with the smooth value of assets. This assumes contributions are coming into the plan. This assumes that we earn 7.5%, but still, over time, the funded status sharply erodes if we don't have contributions coming in at a higher rate than we are planning right now. And when you look on top of that, with the current retiree health program, if we made no changes at all, we would be at a $20 billion unfunded liability for the retiree health program alone by 2014. So that's some of the growing unfunded liabilities of these two programs and what the task force has been evaluating from a financial side. So let's talk a little bit about some other aspects of the retiree health program. This $3.12 assessment that we collect from all the departments and the med centers, that totals about $242 million for this current fiscal year. That's the amount that we collect in total to pay the premiums for our retiree medical and dental. If we made no changes to the current program at all, we would expect, with growing numbers of retirees and medical inflation, that we would be spending $450 million per year on retiree medical and dental if we made no changes to the current program. And that would effectively double the assessment on every department throughout the university. There's also what's called the balance sheet obligation. We have to report this on the university's financial statements because we're not pre-funding the program. We're not paying our normal costs. We're not amortizing any of the unfunded liability. So this is the cumulative increase in what we have to report on our financial statements. This could affect UC's credit rating, our ability to borrow, the amount of unrestricted net assets, because we're not pre-funding the program. So this is one more financial element that we're looking at. So this slide was provided by the Office of the Treasurer. This shows a few things. This shows our current plan on a market value basis over the past 20 years. Now, there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of debate about looking forward, what is an appropriate assumed earnings rate, given our market volatility, given the recent market declines, what's an appropriate assumed earnings rate? Ours is 7.5 currently. Over the past 20 years, we've beaten that assumption. It's been about 8.9%. So this slide shows two things. One, it shows the market value of assets today, really as of 12/31 in our pension plan. Today, in our pension plan, on a market value basis, not smooth, but on a market value basis, we've got about 73 cents for every $1 of liability. And this slide shows that had we not stopped contributions, had we been making contributions the entire time at our normal cost, the blue line on top of that shows what the funded status of the plan would be had we been making contributions that entire time. And it's important to note, too, as far as our investments go, most of the other plans, CalPERS, CalSTRS, they take the money that's coming in from contributions from their members, their employers, and they take that money and they turn it right around and they pay it out in benefits. We haven't been able to do that for the last 20 years. We've had to maintain a cash position or sell assets to be able to pay out this $1.5 billion a year in benefits to our retirees. So let's talk a minute briefly about the current Regents funding policy. The funding policy is just that. It's a policy that the Regents have, and that determines the total amount that should be put into the pension plan. And it's what should be put into the pension plan to maintain 100% funding over the long term. And what you do is you start with the normal cost. Every plan should be at least putting in their normal cost every year to fund the growing liability. That's about 17% of pay for all active members. And again, we're starting at 6. So the funding policy starts with the normal cost, bless you, and it adds the 15th of the unfunded liability, and that is the policy amount that's calculated by the actuary every year. What's different than the policy amount is what the actual amount is, and that's determined separately by the Regents, what the actual amount of contributions will be. And that is based on, and that's the employer rate, and that's the employee rate. And that's based on the availability of funds, the impact of member contributions on the competitiveness of total remuneration, and the collective bargaining as applicable. Now, the Regents have set the employer rate and the employee rate only through June of 2011. We have to go back to the Regents. They have to set a new employer rate and a new employee rate, again subject to collective bargaining, effective July 2011. And they'll do that in part based on what the policy total contribution amount is. So this is our coolest slide, if these things are cool to you. This right here is what I just talked about, the funding policy amount. And we're starting out at about 20% because the normal cost is 17, and the unfunded amount is a 15th on top of that, or about 3%. So if we were making contributions to the plan under the funding policy to maintain our plan's funded status over the long term at 100%, you'd see here that we should be putting in right now 20% of pay in total. We're not. We're putting in 6%. But over time, if we were putting in our funding policy amount every year, and we earned 7.5% every year, then this is the amount that would need to be put into our plan to maintain its funded status at 100% level over the long term. And that increases pretty quickly to over 30% of pay. Just big numbers. This is our normal cost line, about 17% of pay. And this is what we're using for projections. It's based on what has been currently approved, the 4% for the employer, 2% in aggregate for the employees. And then what we're doing here is we're increasing the employer rate by 2% a year, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. We're increasing for the projections the employee rate 2, 3, 4, 5. And then this is the trajectory out. So if we only did these projections, if we continue to underfund the plan, if we continue to dig a deeper hole, we would have a shortfall, a very significant shortfall of what is the policy contributions versus what would be projected. And if we continue to underfund our plan and not pay our normal costs, not amortize our surplus, then the actuary would calculate a new funding policy amount every year, and it would be significantly higher because we're not adequately funding our plan. That would create the yellow zone, or an additional policy contributions due to the projected shortfall of not making the policy contributions in the first place. So there's been a lot of discussion about how we can get state funding, how we can get a higher level of state funding, how we might put more money in the plan, how we can get the medical centers and all the other entities that are supporting salaries to get at a higher rate. The issue with federal contracts and grants, for example, is you can't charge a certain percent of a benefit cost to a contract and grant unless you're charging all other fund sources that same benefit percent, that benefit cost. So the fact that the state is so low right now at 4, and the campuses are redirecting resources from other areas to pay that 4, but if we could get the campuses up to 7, 9, or 10% on the employer side, then we can get all the other money from the medical centers. We can get 10% from them. We can get 10% from the contracts and grants, from the self-supporting enterprises, from the DOE. We can start to get more money into our plan. One of the ways we might do that is through a pension obligation bond. And the Academic Senate has formally requested that the task force look into the appropriateness of UC to issue a pension obligation bond. And to talk in more detail about that, I'd like to turn it over to Nathan.
Thanks, Gary. One of the tools that Gary mentioned that we are looking at in the task force are pension obligation bonds. What these are taxable bonds that are issued by state, local governments And they're basically used to pre-fund all or part of the unfunded liability on for either the pension system or retiree health care. If the university were to issue these bonds, we would essentially be exchanging one liability, our unfunded liability, with another, annual debt service on the pension obligation bonds or our retiree health bonds. Obviously, this has an impact on our debt capacity and credit rating, and it's something that we're looking at very, very carefully. As Gary mentioned, in mid-March, the Academic Senate submitted a formal request to President Yudof, which has been forwarded to the Regents, to issue about $4.5 billion of pension obligation bonds. And this slide shows the impact of this amount of pension obligation bonds on our operating budget. If we issued these in a layered, serial fashion over the next 9 years, when fully issued, this would amount to $324 million out of our operating budget, or just over 8% of our employee payroll. But as Gary mentioned, it also would have the advantage of leveraging about the 2/3 of other funds that we have in our system. One of the big issues with this are the trade-offs, because we have, as a system, we have about $8 billion of long-term debt outstanding, and if we were to, and we have about $6 to $8 billion in additional debt capacity without impacting our credit rating. So if we were to use this amount for the pension obligation bonds, it would have an impact on seismic retrofit, deferred maintenance, or other new construction throughout the system. Some of the advantages of pension obligation bonds, one I just mentioned, is that we are able to leverage our funds. So for every dollar that we put in, we can try to extract $2 from our medical centers, from federal research and other auxiliaries. We also can shape the debt to give us some budget relief in early years, but still get the money into the pension system. And then one of the other things that people look at that I think of as both a advantage but also a concern is just the cost savings. Right now, these are taxable bonds. Right now, we'd issue them at about 6%. As Gary said, our long-term proxy for earnings is about 7.5%. So the more money you get up front, you're able to earn that spread over the time. There is also the concern, though, that you would not meet that 6%, and that would be another drag on the system. I think I've mentioned most of the disadvantages. One is the trade-off with some of the other things that we need desperately at the system. The other is the financial risk, and finally is I mentioned that we are exchanging a liability. We are taking on debt service in exchange for an unfunded liability. But the debt service is hardened. So even in really tough times, as we've been through the last couple of years, we would have to make the debt service payments, where with a unfunded liability, you could choose to defer that for a couple of years. One of the opportunities that we are looking at very aggressively is the opportunity to look at issuing tax-exempt pension obligation bonds. About 20 years ago, you were able to do that, and then Congress closed that. But we are actively talking to the administration about doing that, and that would make these much more attractive as an instrument in looking at holistically at the overall system.
Thanks, Nathan. We're also happy to take a promissory note from the state. They've done that twice before when they have not been able to meet their annual commitment, and they've been paying us off over 30 years, and we're in active discussions with the state on funding. We're probably not going to get it this year, but we are still, it's still a full court press with the state to try to get funding. And if you want to see more about the issue of pension obligation bonds, the Academic Senate has a website. Of course, they have a report and recommendation tab on that website, and there's a paper on this issue called "To Ensure Adequate Funding for UCRP." All right, so that's just one element of the work group's analysis, are these growing unfunded liabilities. Now to talk about the next section of the presentation, the talent management considerations of the current program and any changes to the program. I'd like to turn it over to Vice President for Human Resources, Dwayne Duckett.
Thank you, Gary. As you mentioned earlier, one of the important considerations for this program, as a matter of fact, the most important consideration for this program, is its impact on people. While the financials and the financial situation in the nation overall And at the university, it's prompted us to take a closer look at this. We have to remember that this starts and ends with people and adding value to employees, and we're very much focused on that task, as you'll see later on in the presentation. But let me cover a couple of key elements of what we're doing with regard to the task force going forward. At the end of the day, we could cut benefits in a way that would save money, but it wouldn't help us with what our overall objective is, which is to attract and retain, again, attract and retain the best people. The University of California has been able to do that over the years. It's an important priority for us going forward. It is what I spend most of my time thinking about how the university can do better. Some of the key considerations when it comes to post-employment benefits are to A, reward long service, B, recognize the value of these post-employment benefits, that being retiree health and also the pension program itself. Realize how valuable these things are to the people that work for us now and the people that come to work for us. And last but not least, again, some element of financial consideration, but at the end of the day, we want to have programs that are there to be able to deliver for years to come and to make sure that these programs are sustainable. Again, the most important aspect of offering any of these programs and adjusting these programs is to add value to employees, and in many ways, this is about you and it's about all of us. Let me talk a little bit about the survey process that we rolled out a couple of months ago as a way to get more input from employees to find out what's important to them when it comes to these valuable benefits. We targeted about 17,000 faculty, policy-covered staff, and others with written surveys. We did a sample size, and Towers Watson was the group that helped us do this. They're a consulting firm that's pretty experienced at doing these types of surveys. We got a pretty good response rate. I know that 23% looks relatively low, but for this type of a voluntary survey, it's a darn good response rate, and very reliable statistics are produced from a response rate that's this high. It was also part of the process to do an open online survey that people could go to the website on post-employment benefits and fill out themselves. About 9,000 faculty and policy-covered employees filled out this survey. And about 3,000 retirees participated in the survey that was specifically designed for them. The amazing part about these two different techniques is that they yielded relatively the same types of results in terms of what people said was important to them, what they valued, and what they wanted to see happen going forward. And the full survey report will be available online. Again, emphasizing a number of different ways that we're getting feedback, including these forums. Some of the results that I want to cover as far as highlights. Post-employment benefits are among the top reasons that people come to UC and stay at UC. We heard this loud and clear through the results. Here's the most shocking statistic from the survey right here, and it was shocking from the standpoint of it reflects that 80% of people in UC actually agree upon something together, which was stunning. The high value of these benefits is apparent, and as you know, diversity is our strength, diversity of campus, diversity of different types of jobs and roles within the university, but this is something pretty resoundingly that people say, hey, this represents value to us, and we'd like to see it continue more or less in the form that it has today, and in many ways I think that will be possible. 73% of our respondents said that they plan to have long careers with UC. Plan to stay 20 plus years, et cetera, which is good news for us. We think that that's part of our strength and part of building a good foundation for our mission of the university in terms of research service teaching. And many place the high value on retirement benefits as compared to cash compensation. So again, hearing loud and clear that this is a very important value-add reason that employees come to UC to do what they want, what we ask them to do. In terms of talking about some other considerations, overall our direction with regard to post-employment benefits and our employee programs is to get more alignment to the market. And as you can see, there are a number of places where we are behind with regard to market alignment, and there are a number of places where we're very, very far ahead with regard to market alignment. We've divided up the various groups of people to talk about our total remuneration and where we stand, and in some areas we're behind by a little bit with regard to cash compensation. In some areas, we're also drastically behind with regard to cash compensation. And it's my department's role to figure out a way to achieve more balance between these somewhat competing programs. However, if you look at pension and retiree health, you'll see that in some areas we're ahead of the marketplace by almost 500%. Again, the objective here is to achieve balance. So whereas we're behind with regard to cash compensation, of course we're going to need to do things about that, and over the coming months and probably sustained into the future, you're going to see more programs that emphasize getting more to that market level. You're also going to see some considerations that take into account, does it make sense to be 500% ahead with regard to some of these other benefits, and are people still able to achieve the same type of value for retiree health, for instance, or pension program, for instance, versus achieving a little more value with regard to things like cash compensation. So again, you'll hear us talk a lot about achieving balance. It's not an impossible task. If we look at the medical enterprise as a sort of separate entity, you'll see after a concerted effort over the course of 3 or 4 years, we have been able to make these numbers align a little bit more by emphasizing catching up with regard to cash compensation for some of the key groups, and also bringing our practices more into alignment in some instances with regard to pension and post-employment benefits. But again, you can still see some pretty significant gaps. What these large percentages mostly account for in a medical enterprise is that they tend to operate in a little bit of a different environment. They don't do a lot of defined benefit programs, and they also, in many instances, don't offer the level of retiree health care programs that we offer. So that's why you see some of these numbers in the state that they're in. Again, the major consideration with regard to this and any other program that affects employees' work life and life after work is to add value. And the good news in the presentation that you'll see going forward is that defined benefit scenarios are the primary options going forward. Again, there's been a lot of conversation previous to the task force getting underway that we might move to a defined contribution program, which many universities have, most universities have, the overwhelming majority, and operate in that scenario. But we really don't think as a task force that that's for us. We're going to be maintaining a DB going forward, it looks like. So we stand out in that factor among our competitors, and we want to keep that edge. We want people to have security with regard to their retirement and post-employment benefits, and we see it as a huge advantage for us that we want to keep going. We're also taking into account to make sure that these scenarios are sustainable. Again, we don't want to have programs that are so far out of alignment with the market or so expensive, as was pointed out with some of the earlier slides, that we can't be sure that those programs will be there for the future. Some of the slides that Gary showed you earlier basically indicate that inaction would result in these programs not being there for the future. So while change is hard, difficult, hard to figure out the path to, and also is difficult to implement and uncomfortable, it's necessary for us to make some changes going forward. So our overall direction is consistent with the feedback that we've gotten from the task force, consistent with the feedback that we've gotten from our survey processes that we've rolled out, and also is consistent with a lot of the commentary we've gotten from forums like this, in which we want to continue to get feedback from employees in terms of our direction and make sure that we add value going into the future. So with that, now we'll share some of the details on the programs as the task force has discussed them, and I'll turn it over to Gary.
All right, so let's talk about the work of the task force, what we've been working on, what the range of options are that the task force has considered for the two programs, the pension program and the retiree health program. So the task force here has a steering committee. It's led by Provost Larry Pitts. It has 3 work teams: a pension benefits work team, a finance work team, and a retiree health work team. They're looking at the current program and any potential changes to the current program based on the 6 factors outlined on the slide. And the intention is to make recommendations to the President, not decisions, but recommendations to the President that will allow the Regents to meet their fiduciary obligations and for them to meet their educational responsibilities. And again, any changes that come out of, any proposals that come out of the work of the task force that ultimately are discussed, that ultimately are approved by the Regents, would need to be collectively bargained with our represented groups. And we'll say that throughout many of these slides as we go forward. All right, so let's start with pension. UCRP benefits for new hires. Today, in the pension plan, you need to be a minimum of age 50 to retire, and then the maximum age factor is at age 60. So we're looking at a new hire tier within UCRP, still within the master pension trust, but that would have a different range. Instead of 50 to 60, it would be 55 to 65. 55 would be the minimum, 65 would be the highest age factor for new hires. And part of what the workforce is looking at is how can we encourage later retirements so that we can better integrate with Social Security and Medicare. And when we're looking at this new tier, we're looking at age factors anywhere from 1.5 to 3% at, maxing out at age 65. The task force is also looking at what is an appropriate maximum benefit, what's an appropriate cost of living adjustment, what's an appropriate contribution. We know we're underfunding the plan right now. If we had a new hire tier that had a lower normal cost of about, say, 12%, then perhaps we could stop the digging and fully fund that new hire from day one. We would have the employee start at 5 or 6% of pay, and the employer start at 7 or 8 or 9% of pay right away from day one. We're not underfunding. We're meeting at least our normal costs from the date of the new hire. The plan design would be a new tier within UCRP, as I said, but we've been also asked by our clinical enterprise, by our Med Center group, for just the Med Center group, we have been asked to look into a defined contribution plan. Some of their workforce segments don't work at UC for 5 years. They don't vest. There's no value in the pension plan to them. So the clinical enterprise has asked us to look at a defined contribution plan for new hires. Now, the thing about the pension plan for new hires is it does absolutely nothing for the legacy liability that we have for all of our unfunded liability. Over the long term, it might make our plan a little bit better if we can especially fully fund the normal cost, but it doesn't do anything for our historical unfunded liability. That's a funding issue. Now let's talk about task force considerations for current faculty and staff on the pension side. Something that the task force is looking at is a faster ramp up of contributions for both the employer funding sources throughout the university and for the active members. And again, I mentioned earlier that we need to set a new contribution rate effective July 2011. On the employer side, that could be 7 or 8%. July 2012, it could be anywhere from 10 to 12%. There may be a pension obligation bond used in there to get that employer rate up higher so we can more quickly fund the plan. We're also looking at a faster acceleration on the member, faculty, and staff contribution. The projections right now are 2, 3, 4, 5. We may need to do it faster on both sides, on the employer and the employee, to get the plan better funded. And again, member contributions are subject to collective bargaining for represented employees. There's also a complete stakeholder discussion about choice for current faculty and staff, whether they want to choose or to stay in the current tier, choose to go into the new tier, and a complete discussion on the risks and impacts of any kind of a new tier on current employees. And that we'll talk also a little bit more, because again, the plan reserves the right to the Regents to alter future prospective benefits for active employees. So any discussion about applying a new tier or choice of any kind to current employees is an active subject of discussion and academic senate review that we'll also talk about a little bit later. Let's switch gears now to retiree health. Retiree health is different again than the pension, altering the retiree health program for our current retirees in the level of the UC contribution, in the eligibility requirements. That can adjust the liability number. That can adjust the legacy liability number. So for the retiree health program, the current plan is that you can retire as early as age 50 with as little as 10 years of service credit, and you can get retiree medical and dental. What the task force is looking at is altering the eligibility requirements based on an age and service combination, again, to link up with potentially a new higher tier in the pension plan, shifting it from the minimum age of 50 to a minimum age of 55. And we're looking at a number of different combinations of age and service. Maybe 50 to 54 would be access only. You'd be in the plan, but you pay the full premium. At 60, you might need 20 years of service credit under one of the options to get a 50% contribution. So the task force is looking at a variety of different combinations of age and lengths of service to get a certain level of UC contribution. So that it would be applicable to both new hires and potentially to current employees. And we'll talk about that on the next slide. Currently today, UC pays 89% of the UC contribution, 89% of the total premium we pay in aggregate across all the plans, across all the coverage levels for our retirees. The task force is looking at to sustain the program to phase in a 70 to 80% UC contribution over a period of time, rather than the 89. These changes in the level of UC contribution, in the program eligibility, could lower the overall liability substantially. It could lower the normal cost substantially. One of the things that we're looking at also for the retiree health program is the issue of blended or unblended premiums. And today, what we do is we take all of the active employees, all of our active faculty and staff, and our non-Medicare retirees. We pool them together for a combined rate that our insurance companies quote us for the medical plans. And that is a blended premium. And the effect of a blended premium is that it creates an implicit subsidy because the active pool on itself here, if it was unblended, the faculty and staff would have a slightly lower premium based on their individual group experience. And the non-Medicare retirees would have a significantly higher gross premium based on their group's experience. So that's one more element that the retiree health task force is looking at, is should we continue to blend the experience of all of our active employees and our retirees, or should we look at unblending the experience and rating them separately? So the task force considerations for current faculty and staff concerning the basic program eligibility. Today it's 50 with 10 years of service. If we were to alter that to a different type of eligibility of minimum age and minimum service, the task force is looking at grandfathering a level of current employees based on a total age and service combination. Perhaps if your age and service equals 50, if your age and service equals 55, they're looking at different combinations that would grandfather active faculty and staff under the current program rules for retiree health. But those that were newer, younger employees, new hires would be subject to the new eligibility rules for the retiree health program. No one's grandfathered, though, on the level of UC contribution. That would still be phased into the 70 to 80% level for all retirees. And again, all of this is subject to collective bargaining for represented employees. The task force is also looking at mitigating the impact of these program changes for our retiree health program on those that are not eligible for Medicare, those that are not coordinated. And I don't mean in any way to imply that these people are not athletic, but they simply did not coordinate with Social Security when they were at UC. And they will not be eligible for Medicare when they retire. So this is their primary coverage. The UC coverage is their primary coverage. There's about 1,600 retirees today that are 65 or older that are not eligible for Medicare. There's another 2,000 today that are currently working. So a very active consideration of the task force is to look at how can we mitigate the impact of program changes on those that are not eligible for Medicare. So there's a lot of issues and risks of applying any of these proposed changes to current faculty and staff. And I'd like to have Bob Anderson address some of those concerns from a faculty perspective.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to emphasize that when we've been talking about slides that say plan design changes under consideration for new hires, there is also explicit consideration in the task force of applying those prospectively to future service of current employees. So if you were inclined when you saw the new hire heading on the slide to think, oh, I'm okay, the answer is you may not be okay. It depends on exactly what the task force ends up recommending. You've certainly heard discussion indicating that there's a desire to reduce the normal cost of the plan, and reducing the normal cost of the plan means reducing the benefits that will eventually be accrued. So what I think is safe at this point is you can count on being able to apply your current years of service credit to the current benefit formulas when you choose to retire. But what happens if you say 50 and you're planning to retire at 60, what pension you'll get from your next 10 years of service is very much up in the air. Gary confidently asserted that the Regents have the right to change future benefit accruals of current employees. That would certainly be the subject of litigation. It is not at all clear that the Regents have the right to do that. In fact, in general, California employers, public employers, do not have that right. But I agree that there is a credible legal argument that the Regents may have that right, but it's certain to be litigated, and litigation is likely to be very nasty. For example, I would feel confident that plaintiffs would assert that by having failed to make contributions for over 19 years, the Regents had failed to live up to their fiduciary responsibilities too. I very much hope we will not go that route. I very much hope that we will keep current employees with at least the option to stay in the current plan on its current terms, but we will see what transpires over the next couple of months. One thing to note is that changing the future accrual of pensions for future service of current employees, as Gary indicated, has absolutely no effect on the UCRP unfunded liability. The unfunded liability is entirely based on past service that people have already given, and those benefits cannot be reduced. So it makes no difference in the current unfunded liability. It reduces normal cost going forward so that the amount of money going in for normal cost in the future would be somewhat lower. Of course, reducing normal cost in the future is another way of saying people are accruing a smaller benefit. It's an immediate reduction in total remuneration. It puts UCRP, which is currently a little bit better than competitive for faculty. Now, if we keep the current plan terms and go to a 5% contribution, as we're scheduled to do, UCRP becomes actually a little bit less than competitive for faculty. It may still be competitive or better than competitive for some other staff groups. But if you reduce the accrual of benefits, that's an immediate reduction in total remuneration. And all of those slides indicating different employee groups' competitiveness or lack thereof are all going to shift downward. I think we have difficult choices. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we have to keep the same benefits going forward for new employees. We have to keep retiree health unchanged for existing employees and for retirees. I think we have a real serious budget problem, and we really do need to address it. But at the same time, we have to be very focused on the points that Dwayne made, and I'm sorry that some of the other members of the task force weren't here to hear Dwayne's comments about the point of this all is to recruit and retain an excellent workforce, both staff and faculty. And there's a real danger of throwing the baby out with the bathwater if we focus on benefits in terms of costs rather than as part of a competitive total remuneration package.
All right, thanks, Bob. There's also the issue of workforce segmentation, how you might apply these changes to faculty, to policy-covered staff, to represented groups. That's a very big thing that the task force is looking at. There's been an issue of fairness raised, that if people are making contributions to the pension plan at a certain rate and they're getting a certain benefit formula, but other groups are not, or they're coming in later at a different rate, there's a fairness issue that's been raised that the task force is looking at. So there's a lot in the mix, and again, I wanted to stress that the presentation today is the complete range of options that the task force has reviewed over the past several months. Those range of options are going to be narrowed significantly, and there's going to be recommendations that are made to the president. No decisions are being made by the task force. There's a lot of things in the mix here too. In our environment, as we look at our own benefits, there's a lot of things in the mix in the state, in the nation, about public sector benefits. There's a growing criticism that public pensions are overly generous and directing funds from other programs. There's a lot of newspaper articles that have been coming out recently. Some counties have said that they become a pension provider and they are providing government services on the side. There's been a lot of dubious media reports and dubious studies about the growing unfunded liabilities, and the governor's been quoting them saying that after the dot-com bubble and the housing bubble, that the pension bubble is next for California. So there's a lot of things in the mix that we're aware of, that we're tracking, that we're trying to influence, that we're trying to respond to. UC can learn from this public discourse. We can't wait for others to find solutions. We're autonomous. We have our own unique situation here. We are seeking the best alternatives for UC, for our various workforce segments. What else is in the mix here is, of course, national health care reform. We don't know exactly the full effect on our program. There's a lot of clarifying regulations that need to be issued by the feds. We know that there's a higher Medicare tax for higher earners. We know the dependents are going to be covered up to age 26. We don't know exactly what dependent is yet. They haven't defined that, whether that is married, unmarried, children. We need to find that out. We need to monitor the Cadillac tax, but that's just one of many things that's not effective for many years, not till 2018. But we are going to be carefully monitoring this reform package and the clarifying regulations as they are issued and how they will impact our program. So let's switch back to the timeline. We're a couple slides away from opening up for questions for our panel. The timeline, again, we're doing the spring forums. We're doing 30 spring forums throughout the entire UC system to take your feedback, comments, questions, bring them back to the work team meetings to finalize the recommendations of the range of options we've looked at, make the recommendations to the president. The ongoing academic Senate consultation is underway. Websites here. The main task force website is the first one. The survey results will be posted there shortly. That's the UCRP Future website. This presentation will be posted to the local website within a few days after today. The last November Regents meeting is the full actuarial report for the pension and the retiree health program. Every November we do an annual report to the Regents for both programs with the Regents item and a PowerPoint presentation, a lot of good information there. Dwayne talked about the total remuneration study that was done. That was done last October. It's 132 pages long. That's up on the website. A lot of good information there, along with the fact sheet. The Academic Senate has done a number of papers on post-employment benefits, on UCRP funding. One is called Assuring Adequate Funding for UCRP, that talks about the pension obligation bonds. They've done some analysis on evaluating historical UCRP investment returns. Bob Anderson authored a paper called Market Volatility and the Lump Sum Cash Out. It's an excellent paper if you're considering in any way taking a lump sum cash out when you retire. So there's a lot of good stuff there. And before we start with questions, I'm going to turn it over back to Paul for some housekeeping stuff. And there's microphones for this. Go ahead.
Thank you for the presentation. For those who are on the sides or in the back, there are at least 25 seats in the first 7 rows. So if you'd like to sit in a chair, I encourage you to come up the center aisle, and people will be happy to let you have a seat. We have the microphones on both sides, and I'm going to ask everyone to line up on either side. Gary's going to alternate back and forth and taking questions. And we ask everyone to limit your questions to 1 to 2 minutes so that as many of us present have the opportunity to ask questions. Also, for our colleagues who weren't able to be with us today, the whole presentation has been being videotaped, so people will be able to see the presentation who weren't able to be here. So with that, I'll turn it back to Gary.
Okay, so we'll go back and forth on both sides. Let's start on this side, and then we'll go back and forth.
Okay, I've got a couple questions. One is, I don't see anyone up there at that table that's from represented staff. So I'd like to know actually why the university won't uphold the basic principle that UC workers should have a voice on our own pension plan. And I'm not talking about just at the end, after you've had your task force meetings and made these presentations to us on what you're intending to try to implement, but really bringing us in at the beginning. Why don't we have elected representatives on our own pension board of trustees like Cal State, the community colleges, and other state workers do at CalPERS or CalSTRS? I know that you have not consulted the unions. You can say you're talking to us, but I'm going to be on that pension bargaining team, and I would know if you had been talking to my union. So no, we have not been brought in this process, and this does not count of including us in this process.
Can I address those 2 points? All right, so the first point is the issue of a represented person on the task force. And that issue is the same issue as having a represented person on a pension board that would actually make recommendations. As HERA, the California Higher Employer Education and Higher Education Employer and Employee Relations Board Act, that would be a violation of HERA because we would be direct dealing. We have talked with union leadership about partnering to narrowly amend HERA so that they could be on a board like this or a pension benefits board that ultimately is making a recommendation that is the mandatory subject of bargaining. But with the way HERA is written today, if you're on a body that's making a recommendation that's the subject of a mandatory bargaining, then you're in violation of HERA.
Does that mean that Cal State and the community colleges are in violation of HERA?
What's different about them is, for example, PERS, their retirement plan is CalPERS. CalPERS has hundreds, if not thousands, of contracting agencies. They're not both the employer and the plan sponsor like the Regents are. There's a distinction there. So on the CalPERS board, there's 1,600 cities, counties, contracting agencies. They have one board. They don't have that same HERA problem because the Regents, again, are different. They're both the employer and the plan sponsor. And let me address the second point, which is our discussions with the Union Coalition about the fall and spring presentation. So the first time that we did this presentation in the fall, the very first time we met with the Union Coalition in Oakland and we did this presentation to the Union Coalition leadership. This spring, the second time we did this presentation, it was to the Union Coalition in Oakland. And we actually made a lot of changes based on their input, based on their suggestions, and that is a fact.
Yeah, and what Gary says is true about our interactions with the union coalition. We have met with the major unions that we have, and they have commented on this presentation, and we've updated them on the task force in the fall and about 30 days ago. So I don't know where that particular assertion comes from, but we have been in contact with them and have invited their feedback, and the leadership of organizations like AFSCME, UPD, they all have copies of this, and hopefully they're talking to the membership about it. The other point in terms of union participation with regard to a pension board, starting last, well, I'd probably say winter of 2008, there was a project undertaken to get union participation on an advisory board that could actually make recommendations to the regents. The results of that was a proposal that in June 2009 was shared with union leadership, inviting them to participate on this newly formed board that we were trying to put together with some representatives that they would put forward. We received no response. You obviously have some points you want to make, but you're making a different one than I'm making. The point that I'm making...
it's totally related, and we would like to hear a response to that.
Well, I'll respond to the first question first. There has been absolutely numerous written and verbal invitations for our unions to participate on a newly formed pension board, and the unions have refused to respond or participate.
Does that pension board include decision-making power?
It includes
for
as
the
much.
unions?
The proposal was to make recommendations directly to the regents.
To the
yes.
regents.
That
So
was
The regents have that decision-making power?
yeah, we can't take away from the rest of the questions that people have. The fact is that I was politely trying to say the assertion that you made is simply untrue. Unions have been invited. They have refused to participate. Hopefully, the leadership of your unions will decide to participate, because we would like that very much.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to ask two questions. First, why is the outside management fee for the pension fund listed this past year at 0.52%? All modern pension or investment work that I'm aware of said that that fee should be kept to a minimum, and this is the first year that we've actually had that data listed in the report. The second question is, why, as recently as 2003, was money being taken out of the pension fund for Cap 2 funds, and the actuarial firm at the time saying, no problem, there will be no need to ever make contributions to this pension plan again, and within 3 years that had changed? What credibility does that give to the actuarial firm?
Okay, so I'll take the second one, but Mel, can you take the first one about the investment fees?
Would you repeat exactly the question again?
Yes, this is past year. It was the first time that we saw in the report on the pension fund that the fees to outside managers was 0.52%, which seems like a high figure.
Well, we're constantly reviewing and making asset allocation adjustments to the retirement plan. There's been a huge push on the part of the Treasurer's Office and others to basically begin to disclose more fee information on what it's charging, what basically it's costing to run the assets. We are still significantly lower in our investment management fees than any other public pension plan that we're aware of. Even though we have a number of active external managers, a good portion of the equities are still in an index product, over 60% at a very low fee base. So I think the fees that we're paying are more than offset by investment returns that we're receiving in those asset classes.
And then for the second question, fortunately, I have some emergency slides. And in 2003, we did do the last capital accumulation provision credit. It was called CAP. And at that time, a discrete decision was made by the Regents based on the funded status of our plan at that time to do a capital accumulation provision credit for the active members in the pension plan at that time. In 2003, we were about 128% funded. So at that time, a decision was made to do that, yes.
Yes, but what credibility do we add to the actuarial reports? There were those of us at the time who said, do not take that money out. The error bars are far too high going forwards. You're saying the actuarial report was saying we were 128% funded and said no need for contributions again. Within 3 years, they said we need to make contributions. Now, that was because in 2003 they were saying, oh, it's going to be fine.
Right. In 2003, there was a probability analysis of the looking ahead to see how early contributions would be needed, and that was done by Tower's parent. And it was and it's online. The report's online. The actuarial report. The Siegel Company, we went out to competitive bid. The Siegel Company started in 2004. They replicated the complete actuarial evaluation report. They did a complete true-up. There was no issues at all with the analysis in any way. So there was a decision made again in 2003 about the funded status of the plan, whether to grant that benefit or not, as there were in the past when the age factors were increased, when there was a voluntary early retirement incentive plan offered, and there was a discrete decision made at that time, but there was nothing flawed about the actuarial analysis at that time. So I don't want to debate that, but that's my response.
And so it was obviously wrong.
Well, there is a need to restart contributions based on the recent market declines. They did not predict a minus 19% year. So if that's a flaw, then that's...
Yes, they project 7.5% per year, which includes that 19% drop.
That is the assumed long-term earning assumption, yes. So I'm going to switch over now to this side and take another question.
I'm also coming from a union perspective. I'm wondering if the task force will recommend that UC stop the supplemental retirement for all senior management executives and also the exorbitant individual retirement deals for President Yudof and other executives. If we're really in a crisis, why are we paying the price for this crisis? We don't understand that.
On terms of the senior management supplements that you talked about, all of the provisions of our retirement programs are under review, and that is something that will be looked at.
After everybody's gone, right, with the money?
No, it is being looked at in the task force. It's
being looked at, just as we can't say exactly what is going to be happening with regard to the larger program. That aspect of the program is going to be looked at, and exactly what you suggested is something that has been talked about and continues to be actively talked about.
More than talked about. You need to act on it. Can you explain to us what Yudof is getting, Mr. Duckett? We would like to know.
Or what you're getting, Mr. Brostrom?
Okay, so let's going to go over
we
here.
would like to hear those specifics on these executive compensations.
There's what's called the senior management. There's about 168 people in the university, and they're getting a 5% of pay contribution, and that is under the pension benefits work team. They're looking at whether that should be discontinued, whether it should be...
Discontinue it.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Okay, sir.
I just have some comments. I'm a retired staff person. We're being told that UCRP is not changing for current retirees. But raising our healthcare premium costs much faster than our pensions will ever go up is a cut in our pensions. My other comment has to do with what I guess is being called market alignment or achieving balance, which seem to be the new euphemisms for cutting your retiree health benefits. Private employers, many private employers, don't offer defined benefit pensions, or they're cutting them out. and they don't offer retiree health care. The employer I worked for before I began my career at UC didn't offer those things. That's why we're here. So putting those numbers up 500%, we're ahead of the market by 500%, is meaningless. Yeah, I worked for a small employer that didn't offer a defined pension and didn't offer health care in retirement, and that's why I came here. So you're saying we're going to achieve balance by cutting those things out and bringing UC's benefits in line with all those other people who don't offer good benefits. That's not going to attract the talent that we want to have here. Thank you.
Randy, and the Randy, and the first point, as far as the rising medical costs for retirees, can you, and Marion?
Gary has another emergency slide, if you'll go forward, please. The pay mix slide.
The what?
Pay mix. The one on the campus and med centers, the bars.
Right here?
No, next one.
This one, but for the campus?
That's, yes, but for the campus. Just so that we have a sense of proportionality, the solid bar across the top represents the value, the dollar value of benefits and cash compensation across all workforce segments here at the University of California. The total bar represents about $106,000, okay? And so then you subdivide the bar by salary, health and welfare benefits, retirement, and retiree health. And you will see the various color distinctions going across the bar. Our focus today is on the two benefits called post-employment, meaning retiree health and pension. And those dollar values, I think that you may or may not be able to see them. I've got them behind me. But in the case of the dollar value on average, and again, this is across the whole university. There was a prior slide that showed this by workforce segments. Within the total compensation study, you will see the same data by the workforce segment of which you might be a part. But the dollar value for UC for our defined benefit program runs about $15,000. The actual numbers are $14,911, but let's round it to $15,000. And it represents, out of the total compensation or total remuneration, about 14% of the dollar value. Similarly, when you look at retiree health, that's the last segment of the bar, it runs about $6,600 in dollar value, or about 6% of your compensation. So together, these two components represent about 20% of your overall pay as an active employee. Now, the diagonal bars at the bottom show the marketplace. And we don't use just one marketplace for the various segments of the workforce. For faculty, it happens to be the Comp 8, and more explicitly, the private universities in the Comp 8 that are really our comparators. There's a small school south of us that has a tree for a logo that is one of them. Places like Harvard and Yale, MIT are also our comparators for faculty. As we look at other workforce segments, we look at large California employers, meaning private industry, from whom we recruit for many of our managers and staff here at the university. So looking at those segments of the workforce in the marketplace, the dollar value for what would be considered pension benefits is about $11,500. And you see that that's about a $3,000 difference between what we allocate for pension versus what our market comparators would on average. Similarly, when you look at that small sliver at the end of the diagonally colored bar, you have a dollar value of about $1,500 for retiree health. Now, the last time, I happen to be a Renaissance and Reformation history major. That was my undergraduate degree. But the last time I checked, when I divide 1,500 into 6,000, you get multiples of market, if you will, variation by percentage terms. Now, there are several drivers beyond the dollar values here. Many of our comparator employers do not, as the gentleman said, offer retiree health benefits. Or if they do, they provide them on the basis that we'll have a group rate, but you as a retiree will pay the full rate, like we do for our vision program, for instance. So these are the differences, and don't just be carried away by percentages, but to look at the dollars that are being invested in the program as the university is providing these benefits.
Marion, you wanted to add to that?
I just wanted to make a couple of brief comments in response, being the one retiree here on the panel. I will say that having that defined benefit plan, I totally agree. It has been, it's an amazing thing in this day and age, given the direction that pensions have been taking, both in public and private organizations. As was stated in the slides and in the presentation, there is no consideration being given whatsoever, and I'm on the pension benefits work group, there is no consideration being given of eliminating the defined benefit program. That is going to be the basis of the ongoing UC retirement program in the future. And I will tell you, and I think my fellow retirees will tell you, that having lived through these last few years and watched other investments drop radically, to know that that pension check is going to come in at the same amount month after month, no matter what happens to the economy, is an amazing sense of security. And I hope you all can enjoy that too. The second question does arise in what we pay for our health benefits affect our total remuneration. I don't know of a total remuneration study having been done for retirees. Well, yes, it does. But, you know, everybody else in this country is in the same boat. We will hope that the reform package just passed will help in some ways, but I think it'd be totally unrealistic for anyone, retired or otherwise, to expect that health costs are going to go down or stay the same.
All right, let's switch to this side then, sir.
Hi, I have two questions. One, I got confused by a couple of slides. One that said grandfathered for people who are still actively employed.
Okay.
And another slide which seemed to imply that the rules for us who will, for example, retire in the next couple of years may change. For example, I know there's a formula, if you have less than 10 years of service, that, plus your age, you can keep your medical benefits. So my question is, does it change for those of us who are going to retire soon, the rules that we're looking at using? And the second question is, I saw a lot of, the feeling is yes, and I agree with the retired woman there.
Marion.
I understand that, and I've seen a lot of slides that say, okay, we're going to have to take a hit. I only saw one slide by that gentleman that talked about the bonds. But the second question is, you got $32 billion, and can we get creative and find ways of using that $32 billion? My God, if I was in New York with $32 billion, I could do some damage. Is there some set of people that are looking at using that money to create more revenue as opposed to us taking deeper cuts?
All right, so let's take the $32 billion question first, and I'm going to throw that to whoever would like it on the panel. Randy, go ahead.
I'll take it in part, but I'll also point out a couple of things. And there's something here in the flyer that was distributed too that relates to this. As we restart contributions, the UC isn't blaming anyone, okay? The facts are that we have had the longest public pension plan holiday of any pension plan in United States history. That has never happened on any pension system anywhere in the United States. We can go back and look retrospectively and say, well, maybe we should have never have done that, and we wouldn't be in this where we are today. But given the time circumstance when those decisions were made, the environment was different than today. So the facts are that contributions are a starting point of driving continued long-term funding of the plan. The other component is investment performance. Both things must be present, and that's what we talk about, how we fully fund the plan. Mel is in a much better position to talk about investment performance, so I'll defer to him on that.
So Mel, if you had your say, how would you invest that $32 billion?
With the current asset allocation that we have.
I can't hear you there.
We had one slide where we did show that. We showed where we were currently in a funded status, and we showed had we continued the contributions at normal cost plus some investment returns we had, we'd have been at about 125% funded. The point you make is well taken. If we had been making contributions, even not the full normal cost, we'd have more assets to earn on. And that's another concept of the pension obligation bond. That's a quick way to get contributions immediately and begin to invest those to get additional returns. It also allows us to draw on additional other funded sources as well. So that's the whole purpose here. We've waited a long time. We've kind of waited for the state to kind of throw in some contributions. They're not coming forward. It doesn't look like they're going to come forward. We have to move forward. The quicker we put assets into the plan, we can earn a rate of return on those and begin to work down this unfunded liability.
Gentlemen, I don't feel that question was answered. What I asked was, here we are today with $32 billion, and other than that bond idea, here's the money we have today. Is anybody looking at how can we use this money today, not blaming anybody, but how can we use this money today to invest wisely in maybe some things we have never done before to make more money than we make currently? That was the question. Today.
Part of the strategy here is that the Regents set the investment policy for the assets of this pension trust, and they have had a very prudent target for a period of years. We've had folks recommending to us that we should be assuming a rate of return over 10% as recently as 2 years ago. It's completely fallacious, and our actuaries responded to that. We can't invest our way out of the current circumstance. If you were to try to do that, and we've looked at some modeling, we would have to achieve over a 30% rate of return for the next 5 years or more to get back to a target of 100%. And the last time I checked, nobody's doing that. The Regents have taken what is considered to be a conservative approach to these assets. They set the policy parameters for investment, and the Treasurer's Office, by direction, and nothing more than that, by direction of the Regents, invests these assets accordingly.
Okay, so again, I'm asking a really simple question. All I'm asking is somebody looking at today.
The short answer, it's the Board of Regents and the Investment Committee of the Board of Regents.
They are looking at outside the box of using that money.
I wouldn't call it outside the box. They've set a range of asset allocations and parameters for investment. They constantly review that.
Bob, Mel?
Yeah, so I'd like to say one thing in this, that a lot of the shock we're going through is because we've gotten used to not making any contributions. And in fact, the university has been able to expand and take more students and hire more people because it was able to promise them a valuable benefit and it wasn't paying for it. That is not sustainable. We need to recognize that a pension plan needs contributions. People have told me, well, isn't it a pension plan that's about 80% funded okay? And the answer is, well, yeah, it's probably okay as long as you're making contributions. We need contributions, otherwise this whole thing will go under. There's just no question about it. And it will take down the University of California with it.
Let me go back to your first question then. So the retiree health slide. So the slide here is, again, the range of options that the task force is considering. And this slide is on retiree health. So the retiree health, they're looking at the application of a different minimum eligibility age and a different amount of years of service credit required and a different percent of UC contribution, not only for new hires, but also for active employees today, active faculty and staff. But we're looking at the next slide here, grandfathering current faculty and staff. So they would fall under the old rules of 50 and 10 and not fall under whatever the new rules are. And they're looking at different combinations of who of our active faculty and staff they would grandfather through some combination of age and service. So for example, maybe a total of 50 and 10 would be grandfathered, or a total of 50 rather. You could be 40 years old and have 10 years of service, your total would be 50. But that is what the range of options that the task force is looking at. And then if you were grandfathered and this were to go through and be approved and collective bargaining and all that, if you were grandfathered, then you'd be under the old rules, not the new ones. All right? So we're going to go to this side. Hello.
Hello. I have a couple of points that I want to make. They're actually not questions, and I'm just admitting that in full disclosure here. I am one of the people, you're welcome. I am one of the people who is listening to this with very keen interest, as I am of a certain age and I have 31 years of service here, which are about to end involuntarily with a layoff at the end of June. So I, again, have a very keen interest in this. But I wanted to say that I think that the Regents and the gentleman and the one lovely woman sitting up ahead of us have a real responsibility to be advocates for us as employees. That what we have done, we talk about post-employment benefits. Another more common, I think, or more descriptive term of that is deferred compensation, which is that we have been working, in some case for decades, here for a piece of the pie that was going to come later, and for what we believed was going to be a secure retirement that we can enjoy without having to worry about the wolf knocking at the door. That appears to be in jeopardy. And I want to make sure that our advocates, and the University of California is supposed to be one of these shining lights that is supposed to present what is good for the most of us. That what I want the University of California, and that takes the form of suits sitting up here, and it takes the form of the Regents of the University of California to do, is to resist the temptation to join the race to the bottom. The race to the bottom involves defined contribution plans. We need to maintain the solvency of a defined benefit plan.
After that?
I'm not done, thank you. Not yet, not till June 30th, I'm not done. One of the presenters talked about the allusions to the greedy public employees eating out of the public trough, and that's the way that our defined benefits are often looked at by the public, by private employers, et cetera. And we need to take the lead in turning that around. The defined benefit plans, first of all, work better. They provide a more secure income with a higher yield than defined contribution plans. I think that we don't want to fall into the trap of saying, oh, we're going to offer a second tier of benefits that involves people opting for a defined contribution plan. I am pro-choice, but I am not pro-choice when it comes to something that will ultimately lessen the benefits we get under a defined benefit plan. The fewer people we have in the defined benefit plan, the less of a shared risk do we have within that plan. So the more people that get siphoned off into defined contribution, the worse off the people in defined benefit plans are. I also just wanted to make a couple of other points. We're not going to fix things in this room, and the Regents are not going to fix things in their chambers. Although we need to stand firm and stand on principles. What we need to do, one of the things is, and I think that at least I know Mr. Scott and Mr. Duckett, and I believe Mr. Brostrom are at least aware of the possibility of exploring self-insurance for the University of California and making that as an option for employees. What does that do? It removes medical insurance companies from the equation. That is one thing which I believe the University of California is considering and had talked about setting up a pilot program for. I urge you to continue that exploration. And finally, and I will be final here, we are not going to fix this system if we don't help to fix the system that is broken in Sacramento. And that means getting rid of the 2/3 majority requirement and exploring alternate sources of revenue like the oil severance tax. And the University of California needs to take the lead on this. Do not join that race to the bottom, but stand up for us, because everybody on this side of the room has a vested interest, and we deserve more than we're being threatened with. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Sir?
Gary?
Pardon me. I'll start.
If I could, thank you for those comments, all of them. And it points up again, I think, a vital role that all of us have in terms of becoming UC advocates. It's a very simple thing to do. Go to the UCOP website. It says UC Advocate. It will show you who your representatives are. It provides model letters and or emails, phone numbers, addresses if you should care to write them or visit them. They ask for our vote. They ask for our campaign support, and yet they have refused to act on our university budget or to make contributions to our pension plan. And it's a question of fairness. We're taxpayers too, and we need to be telling them that. And I hope that all of you will take that action step as you leave here today.
All right, sir.
Yeah, I have one question, but I wanted to start with an anecdote. The low-wage workers on campus just received an order. They're prohibited from collecting cans out of the trash to supplement their cutback income. And I find that to be just really classic, typical of the University of California. My question is, you've had a 19-year contribution holiday. I want to know where that money went. You said it was for expanding services, but it was our money. We've been paying 2% all along during that holiday. So it wasn't it may have been the longest contribution holiday that an employer had, but it wasn't a contribution holiday for us. So after 20 years of not paying in, I wonder where that money went and why you can't kick your contribution up to 10%, which is your traditional policy, and rather than just start with the 4% you're offering now.
All right, so I'll take that one. The slide up here is the historical funded status over the last 10 years. And this is only the last 10, not the last 20. When we stopped contributions in 1990, we were 137% funded. Every employer funding source at that time stopped contributions. The state of California gave us a line item amount of contributions every year. That stopped. The Department of Energy stopped. All the funding sources that gave UCRP money stopped contributing at that time. The money didn't go anywhere. It stopped coming into the plan. The state stopped giving it to us. We were concerned, as our funded status was projected to increase, even above 150%, it was 149% here in 2001, we were concerned that the Wilson administration would raid UCRP like they did with PERS. They took $3 billion out of PERS. They got sued. They had to put it back in. We were concerned that the Department of Energy would want money back out of the plan based on prior contributions. So we were so super funded at that time that the employer contributions stopped and the member contributions stopped going into the pension plan, but they were redirected into individual accounts, the defined contribution plan, and that money today is at the master record keeper, Fidelity. And it's been going there ever since. And a lot of people don't know that in that particular plan, the DC plan, you can direct any of those investments to any of the funds that are at our record keeper, but the money's there, and the money's gonna stay there. Now, the contributions are being restarted, and it's the same exact formula that was suspended in 1990. So the money is going to stop going into the defined contribution plan, and it's going to restart going into the pension plan, just like it was in 1990. It's the same exact formula. So the member contributions, that's your money, it's been in your accounts. There's been no employer or employee money going into the pension plan for 20 years.
When did the DOE and those other departments start contributing? At what percentage? did it have to drop to for them to start a contribution? Or are they still not contributing?
They're still not. They're going to restart April 15th on the employer side, and we're past that on the employer side. The employees are May earnings, but the employer is starting at 4%, all employer funding sources going forward. What the task force is looking at is how quickly can we get all the employer funding sources up to, as you say, 10, 12, or even more %. Part of the issue is the complete lack of state funding. So what do we do with getting the state portion up higher? Do we issue a bond? Do we take a promissory note? That's what the task force is looking at, is how can we get everybody up, including the med centers, to a higher rate quicker. I'm going to go to this side.
What did you do with the money that you saved from not contributing for 20 years? Where did that money go?
People are lining up, and we're taking questions for people that are lining up, and I'm going to go over there.
Thank you very much for this presentation. It's very detailed. I have been retired for 15 years very happily after having been on campus for 10 years. And I have nothing but good feelings about how this all went for me. What I am concerned about right now is the corporatization of America and the number of people on the Board of Regents, particularly, who are corporate connected and whose thinking is about corporate money and gain and all of that. And so what I simply want to say is a warning that the zeitgeist of the culture right now is focused on money for the rich. And we're forgetting, the country is largely forgetting those of us who are not rich. And so in all of the future deliberations and considerations, my hope and my wish is that the University of California, which is always ahead of the game, would keep in mind the original principles on which the country is based, which is fairness and equality, so that people on the top who have been making a lot of more money than I ever did in working here will reduce, voluntarily or by law, reduce the very unequal pensions that they get compared to those of us who are on the lower end of the scale. Thank you.
Thank you. You want to take that? No? All right, thank you for that. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm a UC retiree of 2.5 years, and I'm loving every minute of it. I want all of you to join me. But first, you have to fix this problem of your retirement. These guys are not going to do it for you. These guys go to barbecues with Yudof, right? Happy hour, whatever. They're not on our side. They're really not on your side. They won't even talk to union reps. You know, if the union reps won't come answer you, then you go to them and you say, I need to talk to you because your ideas and your future is important to me. Robert Anderson, that's what you need to say. You go to them because these are your clients. Okay, that was one point. When you're talking about taking more money out of the employee's paycheck, you're gonna also talk about putting more money into it, the paycheck. You can't do both. I mean, you can't have it one way and not the other. People already in the service department are at poverty level wages on this very campus. Most of the people who work in the service department can get stuff off of welfare. They apply, they qualify. Did you know that? The people who empty your trash and sweep your floors and polish your floors and change your lights, working for UC Berkeley at poverty level wages. Every time there's a pay increase and the union gets up there and fights and fights and fights with your regents, we get a 3.5% or 4% pay raise that's taken away from us 10 months later. Furloughs now. I don't really know what exactly is going on now because I have like closed my eyes since I left because it was so frustrating before. However, you guys have to think of wage increases if you're going to talk about taking more money for health care. In the meantime, maybe by 2014, we might have some decent health care in this country, especially if all of you guys start hollering for single-payer health care. Medicare for all. So then you don't have to go through all this, oh, what did the market do today? I don't know about you, but I don't understand most of that shit.
All right, so let's address...
Okay, no, I'm not done. Yudof sent us a letter as retirees asking us to help pressure people in Sacramento. This was like about 3 weeks ago. I don't know what he wants the money for. Has he ever been transparent with me? If I go there and pressure them for money for Yudof, how do I know it won't go into his $240,000 salary at the end of 4 years? He hasn't said what he wants the money for. What I want it for is the employees on this campus. And I hope all of you do too, but you have to get up here and stand in line and speak. You can't just sit here and let this happen to you. You gotta talk to these guys, write down their names and their phone numbers. Ask them what they said at the last meeting. This is your business.
All right,
and you say that the retirees' benefits will stay the same, and then you say they can be raised any time, the price of it. What? Huh? My retiree benefit is a fixed salary as far as I know. You take more money out of it, I have less to live on.
I understand.
Okay, do something like that. Fix that. Okay, I'd like to see a Mercer chart up there that has a comparison of the top management positions with the salaries of these people. Let's see that kind of research, and then you'll know which side you need to be on.
Okay, you've asked other people to speak, so I'm going to go over here and have you speak.
These are the best people.
Go ahead.
All of us, not the people up there, not the Regents. These are the best people you could possibly hire, and you need to treat them that way.
If there's one point I can make out of all of this, and all the things that you said, is that we are, at the end of the day, one university. We are not separated on terms of, especially this particular program, on terms of having different parties, having different interests. We all have the same interests. It's to maintain this program into the future and to involve you and your union leadership to help us maintain these programs into the future. So we have the same aim. I just choose not to yell at you about it, but we're trying to do the same things here.
All right, go ahead, please.
Hi, I had a question about the Medicare mitigation of the people who don't qualify for, aren't in the Medicare system. I happen to be one of those employees that is not in the Medicare system. So I want to know what kind of ideas you were thinking of doing.
All right, Randy, go ahead.
And I'll ask Marion to chime in and help me with this as well. First and foremost, you heard the statistics of how many we have today, how many we expect to be in that same category. And so the question is, how should that group, going forward, be charged for their health care premium? Should they be in the active faculty and staff pool with the non-Medicare retirees? Should they be rated with the Medicare retirees? Then you saw the blended or unblended discussion that we're going through. So first and foremost, there is absolutely a conclusion by the Retiree Health Care Task Force that this group needs to be protected, first and foremost, because the University of California Retiree Health Plan is their only retiree health benefit. So it's not a question of whether we're to protect them or not, but how should they be protected? And given the fact that they did not pay into Social Security, neither did the university, Someone said that these folks have saved the university a lot of money, and yes, that's true, and they save themselves a lot of money. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, they need to be protected. And so the Retiree Health Work Group has made that decision. Now the question is, how should they be considered as we are rating groups? And that's the issue at hand right now. So, Mary?
I'm not on the health task group, so I really can't speak further except to reiterate that yeah, I go back to this we, they thing, us up here, you out there. You know, we're all of us up here are also university employees or retirees. I worked on this campus for a number of years. I see us, as Dwayne said, all as one. And the concern of the task force is people like you standing at the microphone there. We want to retain as well as we can every one of the benefits. We would love to enlarge the benefits. Financially, we can't go forward indefinitely that way. So it is a question of how do we get the most bang for the buck that we possibly can for you and for us.
Hi, Candy. Go ahead.
Well, he mentioned my name. I'm Candy, and I happen to be on the retirement board. I am a staff member, but we're only an advisory board. We have discussions about how we cannot make advice to the regents at times on issues, and having the task force bring information to us, to the advisory board, before they go out and such. But, well, saying all that, since you brought my name up, I did have a question about Medicare. I was not aware until you mentioned that some of us are eligible for Medicare and some of us are not. And how do we find that out?
Well, those that are not eligible for Medicare from their UC employment would have elected so in 1976, 1977. And so you would have made a decision at that time as an active employee to not be eligible, or to not go into Social Security, and then the result of that was later you would not be eligible for Medicare. So about 1,600 current retirees that made that decision in the 70s are not eligible for Medicare from their UC employment or any other employment, so they fall into that group. There's still about 2,000 active faculty and staff that are still working today that made that decision in the 70s that are expected to also not be eligible for Medicare because they have not been making Social Security or Medicare contributions that whole time.
And when did that change?
It became, UC was offered a one-time election, I think that was offered over a period of 2 windows, and then all new hires after that point in time, federal rule, had to be in Social Security, had to be in Medicare. So there was no option after 1977 to not be in Social Security.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question I have is about our layoffs and the furlough impact on our retirement and pension percentage that's going in. You had a chart up there about 20% that UC would like to see start being funded. Is that correct? Is that how I read that chart?
Which chart? Let me go back to it here. Is that the funding policy amount, 20%?
Right, and we're going to start at the 4% and 2%, but you would like to see it go up to 20?
Right, so the normal cost here is the straight line across. That's 17% of pay. That's what we should be putting into the pension plan every year just to try to water to cover the increase for years service for active members. Because we're underfunded because of the market loss, the 20% is the sum of the normal cost plus a 15th of the unfunded liability. So the Regents funding policy says we should be putting in 20%, but we're starting right now at 6%.
Okay, and then I look at that 20% as the last 20 years we haven't put any money in, and now we're being penalized for that. And now we're being asked to make up for all those years. And again, where did that money go for that time that UC did not? And that question has never really been answered. There's been a savings where UC hasn't had to put any money into our pension fund. So there's a savings there. Now it seems like we're being penalized for that. And I think we, as low-aged workers, there are quite a few of us here in all aspects of our jobs. We came here to work because we had a good benefit plan. under lower wages than normal, but we do need a living wage, and you can't keep cutting us by increasing our pension. And there is a disconnect with the execs and their wages and how we live. So I sit on a board and I bring up issues at times about how it will affect us if you raise this much money out of these low wages. And you sit there and you look at me like, well, you don't really get it. And I think there is a disconnect. Yeah, we all want the benefit. You guys still want your retirements. And that's with like more than one, apparently you have, some of you. So we do need to relook at how it's going to affect the low wages. And you have to either put more money in our paychecks to pay for this or do something to protect us.
All right, so let me just make one comment too about the 17. Okay, go ahead. Who wants to?
Well, a couple people have brought up the notion of where did this money go, and I think it's a very good question and something, we are, this coincided with a period in UC's history when there was a massive disinvestment from the state of California. If you look at the per student funding that we got in 1990 versus what we get today, it's about 50%. So the state has basically cut our per student funding by 50% during that time. Now, tuition and fees have gone up, but that have really made up only about a quarter or half of the shortfall. So on a per student basis, our funding is much lower. That would have been much worse if we had been paying into the pension system. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that there should have been steady contributions at some point, but it's not like we've been using this money for additional services or things. It's really just been making up the shortfall that we have not been getting from the state of California.
The 3% on top of the 17, that's the legacy part. That's the past. The 17, though, is the annual cost for an additional year of service. And we haven't been paying that because our plan was so well funded and we've run our plan assets down. But the 17 is not part of any legacy liability. It's the annual increase in cost just for this type of plan for 1 year of service. I saw Randy's hand up too.
Well, the question about where the money went from any of the fund sources of the university. So you have the state of California during this 20-year period. They have saved about $2 billion by not making pension contributions to UCRP. The Department of Energy has had its saving for its portion of UCRP contributions. We've been able to similarly go through any of the other auxiliaries, the medical centers, and so forth. Everywhere there should have been an employer contribution in the University of California, either programs have expanded, services have expanded, etc. Similarly, employees, 80% of all faculty and staff of the University of California have not made a UCRP contribution. But I can guarantee you that every retiree who was in this audience, and I noticed that the vacancy rate seems to increase as we get nearer to lunchtime. We have made, I don't think anybody here has missed a pension check.
No, but
and many of them did make contributions, but the point is, during this same period of time, every year we've been paying out of the pension trust $1.4 billion. With no comparable contributions going into the trust. So the money hasn't disappeared. It's the fact that we haven't had contributions. We've had market returns at certain levels, up and down over that period of time, and we've continued to make pension payments. And now the time is for us to restart.
Okay, and the furloughs and layoffs, is that going to increase our deficit in our pension?
Lynn?
I'm not here to answer the question. I just want to make one quick remark before we run out of time. I just want to correct one inaccuracy that not everyone up here is an executive of the UCOP folks. So we have folks who's representing the retirees. I'm with the policy covered staff. Paul's with our staff assemblies on every campus. You have a staff advisor to the Regents who's in the crowd today, and he is from this campus. The only recommendation was even for the unions who actively spoke up is, I would recommend every staff person and I would at this point count faculty as part of our staff, as employees of this UC, to be well aware of these forums and information posted on the websites. If the union staff or the reps aren't talking, I don't care. I think every one of us as employees need to be aware of what we're doing now is aware and making sure everyone knows what's the problem and what the solutions are. Everyone can jump onto the website or at least get information from the unions or from us or from anyone here. And I really want to welcome everyone to do that. Things that the obstacles are coming up, such as things that were mentioned earlier today, of possible segmentation, possible grandfathering of issues. Faculty are really looking at this issue, and I really respect them for spending all this time on it. So please try to look at what the studies have been. Bob has done a great work, but I want to recommend you guys to all at least look at that information and not count on others to interpret that for you. Thank you.
I'd like to thank everyone. It's 12:02, but we are going to take the last question or comment from the gentleman over here, and then that will conclude our formal session. Thank you.
And before you start, sir, I just wanted to also say that with the furlough or the START program, the benefit that you have in retirement is unaffected. The benefit's protected. It's at the pre-furlough salary. It's at the pre-START salary. In the case of the furlough program, there is less money coming into the plan in contributions, but the person who is subject to the furlough or elects to start, their benefit in the pension plan is not impacted. All right? So we got our last question. Sir.
Yeah, I have a very specific question about retiree health benefits, and particularly the way it affects dependents. Some of us, everyone who retires will have to make a decision as whether they do lump sum or the defined pension plan. On the health side, benefits are currently covered for the retiree and dependents. Is there any discussions going at all about possibly reducing the dependent side of that in favor of retaining the employee side?
The short answer to that is no. We have become aware of this particular issue, this question that seems to have risen in a couple of recent forums, and it was my first hearing of it down in Southern California the other day. But no, we absolutely are not looking at that type of issue.
Thank you, everyone, for coming today and for your comments.